in. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Renee Stoute's family who are there as well. We're really glad in the age of Zoom that we can actually do things that we can't normally do, which is that it's easy for family members to come and support one another in these trying times. So welcome to the trial of Renee Stoute, who has been accused of finishing her master's thesis and decided to defend herself. So she has no attorney, although we encouraged her. It is pro bono work, of course. I believe you know all of the professors. There's Ambassador Einik, who's one of the readers. There's me, Douglas Yates, who's one of the readers, and there's Rushi Anon, who is the advisor. And the way we do that is we have the student present first their PowerPoint presentation, which should take about 20 minutes. And then we have a series of question and answers. We always want to make sure we leave enough time because all three of the readers have read the document. And this is the first time, and maybe the only time, that you'll have this experience where everyone kind of read the document, is giving you feedback. So we'll begin with the non-advising jury members first, and then we'll end with the advisor so that she can respond perhaps to issues or questions raised by the other jury members. So with no more ado, I introduce now Renee Stoute. Is it possible for fossil fuel, you can put up your PowerPoint while I'm reading this. Is it possible for fossil fuel multinational corporations to be environmentally sustainable? You're provoking me. And maintain financial success through sustainable development goals? A case of Orsted. Renee, the floor is yours.
All right, first, thank you everyone for coming to my thesis defense. I'm really happy to see everyone's faces and the support. Just before I begin, I do have a lot of acronyms, as you can see just by my title slide. So I will explain what they mean, but MNCs are multinational corporations, SDGs are the Sustainable Development Goals, and CSR is corporate social responsibility. So I will just go ahead and start with my title slide, MNCs, SDGs, and the pursuit of green. So my thesis research question focuses on asking the question, is it possible for energy MNCs to embrace environmental sustainability while maintaining financial success? And so in order to determine this, we're going to be using Orsted as a case study because in 2020, they were found to be the most corporately social responsible and sustainable company in the world. And then in 2021, they are now the second ranked, but again, the first energy company to be sustainable as well. So that was found through Corporate Knights, which I will explain further as the CSR ranking situation. So the main question of asking why are we even focusing on this in international relations, and it's simply because there's enough research and proof and evidence to say that climate change is a serious issue that affects us now and will affect us in the future. And so MNCs are major international actors in global governance. They account for nearly 1/3 of the global GDP and half of global exports. So you can see this chart on the right shows just the top MNCs in the world. So they really do have a huge impact. And then this picture here also just shows the breakdown of where these MNCs are located and the percentage of them in the world market. So to continue, fossil fuel exploration and production accounts for $2.1 trillion in the global economy. So this thesis is not really negating the importance and the need and the use of fossil fuels, but at the current rates that we're using them, it's not really sustainable because we're expecting countries to grow their GDP about 3%, and coupling that with population growth and just general SDG achievement, which means that people will be escaping poverty and finding better qualities of life, we can't sustain the amount of consumption of fossil fuels that we're currently at. So this chart here shows that breakdown. You can see within the last 50 or 60 years, we have grown exponentially, and that's going to continue to grow even more. And so fossil fuel companies have contributed to 35% of all energy-related carbon dioxide and methane emissions worldwide since 1965. And every year, on average, energy production accounts for 72% of all global emissions. So you can see that breakdown in this chart here with the carbon dioxide emissions with fossil fuels. So developing countries have not significantly contributed to current levels of environmental damage, and yet as they grow, they're expected to not contribute at all to climate change. So nations really need to develop the framework to understand global dynamics and the implications on international actors and stakeholders. So as technology provides more opportunities for extraction, global energy is expected to increase by 1.2% each year from 2014 to 2040. And that means that non-OECD countries are going to account for about 90% of that demand. So conflicts are expected to arise as climate change continues to impact the environment. So even as the developing countries grow, with their increased economic activity, it's going to lead to higher use of non-renewable energy while still remaining heavily reliant on the environment, which then has a significant impact on the global environment as a whole. So the reason why Orsted was selected is, like I said before, it's the most sustainable company in the world, and they've even vowed to completely phase out the use of fossil fuels in 2019. So they went from one of the most fossil fuel heavy using companies in the world to now the most environmentally sustainable companies. And so since 2006, they've been able to completely reduce their fossil fuel usage or reduce their carbon emissions by 80%. And so they're on track to become carbon neutral completely by 2025. And they will have phased out coal also by 2025. And so by 2040, they're hoping to become carbon neutral across their entire company, and that includes their partnerships and their suppliers. So if you even want to become involved with Orsted, you also have to be carbon neutral. So all of this is going to happen years before the global target that was set by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change's Paris Agreement. So by focusing on completely dismantling the very foundation of the company through their leadership, by adding women on boards and ensuring the good health and well-being of their employees, they've really changed and directed their attention to crucial environmental trends in society. So they've been able to establish themselves as a leader in clean energy and really earn that title of being corporately social responsible. And so in 2018, they were actually in 70th place on the CSR ranking, and they jumped all the way up to first place. So it's a really big deal. And also with President Biden's clean energy initiative that he actually announced last month, Orsted is at the forefront. They are the leader of ensuring offshore and onshore wind, as well as solar energy, all of that. So again, a really, really big deal to have Orsted as the case study. So the main and important concepts for this thesis, as I stated before, MNCs, which are multinational corporations, and those are basically any company that has a headquarters in one country and also does production, manufacturing, and work in many others. We have the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and these are a set of 17 goals that are supposed to make the world a better place in different aspects. So they focus on the 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. And so each goal is expected to grow, even if it's not directly impacted. As long as one goal is being achieved, all the others are expected to grow as well. So governments, corporations, and even us as individuals, we can incorporate these strategies into our own efforts in whichever way that we see fit. But when a business incorporates the SDGs, we call that CSR, or corporate social responsibility. And so that can be defined as the continuing commitment by businesses to behave ethically and contribute to economic development while improving the quality of life of the workforce and their family, as well as the local community and society at large. So they need to make sure that they're contributing positively to economic growth, ensuring that their employees are supported in the working environment, that the community isn't suffering from any of the actions that they're doing, and that the environment overall is not harmed. So at the top left, we have our CSR pyramid that focuses basely, economically, legally, ethically, and then philanthropically, donations and volunteering and all of that. So the last bit is sustainability and sustainable development, which is development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So this can be a bit of a contradiction because usually when we think of sustainable development, there's a heavy focus on the economic side instead of environmentally or socially, because usually the only way that we can measure development is through GDP. And so that's our only indicator. So it can be kind of a contradiction, but it's still something that we have to take seriously when we're engaging in corporate strategies. So my literature review, the main points that I found within my research is understanding the relationship between MNCs and states, just recognizing that there is a huge influence that MNCs can have, and accepting that there's also a fossil fuel agenda because they contribute a lot to the global GDP. Why would we completely turn our backs on them when they help us so much grow so much economically? The next part, again, is our CSR and just seeing the ways that MNCs can engage in CSR. They can do that by working with the Global Compact, checking their CSR rankings, or even engaging in stakeholder theory, which I will explain later. Sustainable development, which again, as I said, it's hard to define. There's not one definition. It really depends on the MNC and the MNC's goals. There's not a succinct or collective idea. So you can kind of make it whatever you want. And so that's why it's a big deal that we focus on it environmentally. But when we do have sustainable development environmentally, that ends up being a circular economy, which is basically everything that Captain Planet taught us, which is all the RE words: reuse, repair, refurbish, remanufacture, recycle, or share. That helps us to minimize waste, our use of resources, the pollution, and the carbon emissions, instead of having a linear economy, which is what we engage in normally, which is using something, buying something, using it, and then throwing it away when we're completely done with it. Instead, we can salvage things for parts, or even if it can't be salvaged or can't be reused, we can burn it further for energy. And so it helps us to restart the process in our society. The last two parts we've kind of already touched on: developed versus developing countries. So for instance, even though the US has already degraded its environment during the Industrial Revolution and other periods of economic or increased economic success, the current levels of economic growth that we see today, we wouldn't have it without this environmental degradation. So the environment is able to improve because we've already reached a certain threshold of economic growth. But the developing countries, regardless of the economic growth that they achieve, their environment is still going to be aggravated because they have to continue to meet their own needs, as well as providing for the needs of already developed countries. So to continue on to my theories section, I focused on two theories, and I'll first start with the counter theory, which is the economic shareholder theory. And so this is exactly what you think of when you think of business and working. The purpose of a corporation is to make profits for their shareholders. And so because the shareholders are expected to maximize profits at all costs. And so the shareholders determine the trajectory that the company goes, and they decide whether the company will be successful. And so this was established by Milton Friedman in his Friedman Doctrine he wrote for the New York Times. But in contrast, we have the environmental shareholder theory, which allows corporations to put the values of the environment first and then integrate CSR strategies to meet the needs of their stakeholders. And in this case, the environment is the stakeholder. So this was established by Edward Freeman in his book, Strategic Management, A Stakeholder Approach. And so when we incorporate this idea, we are going to see financial growth, regardless of how much capital we have to put up front in order to engage in green energy strategies. But a lot of fossil fuel corporations will argue that there's a huge financial risk and there's not enough payoff to actually begin engaging in environmentally friendly strategies. So this theory tells us that while in the beginning money might appear to be lost because you have to, invest in a lot of different things, in the long run, you're going to be more sustainable than your other non-environmentally friendly counterparts, just because you'll be able to last longer in the long term. So my methodology and my case study, there are 8 protocol questions that I will show you, but just keep in mind that only 5 have to be an answer of yes. And so in order to even be considered for, to be measured up against Orsted, you have to meet the general key performance indicators as established by corporate Knights. And these KPIs focus on covering resource, employee, financial management, as well as clean revenue and supplier performance. So these are just the basic requirements that the corporation has to meet first. But these hypothesis protocol questions will explain the contextual conditions of Orsted's success using corporate reports and their press releases. And then we're also going to take a look at the relevant SDGs and the actions that Orsted has taken to impact these SDGs. So Orsted will say in their press releases that they're focusing mainly on Goal 7, affordable and clean energy, and Goal 13, climate action. But through other sustainable actions, they actually positively impact 9 other SDGs as well. So again, it's a really big deal what they're doing, if I can't reiterate that enough. So this is just an example of all of the KPIs that Corporate Knights has, as well as the universal KPIs that have to be met. They can't have any financial sanctions against them. They need to make sure that they're putting women on their boards. They have to pay their taxes every year, and a lot of other different things. So I found the relevant SDGs that matched the relevant KPIs to create my own list as well. So my protocol questions focus on MNC and CSR incorporation, stakeholder engagement, MNC and financial growth, MNC environmental efforts, and MNC and SDG incorporation. So the main one I would like to focus, at least for now, is talking about the financial growth, because the economic side will tell us that we're going to see a huge decrease. There's no reason for us to even become involved. So my question is, has the MNC seen a significant decrease in their financial growth? And with Orsted, this isn't true, because they actually saw a 17% gain in their financial reports from 2018 to 2019, and that was even after they had to divest their fossil fuel facilities and invest in a lot of green energy technologies. So it's a really amazing thing. My next one is looking at the SDGs incorporated into their business strategies. And so, yes, they've incorporated quite a lot. They incorporated 11 of the 17, so well more than half in their business strategies. So this includes ones suggested by Corporate Knights and ones in their own ESG reporting, as well as my own findings. So you can see on the left, these are the relevant SDG goals, and then on the right is just their general Orsted action. So when you look at their ESG reports that date all the way back from at least 2017, you can see that not only do they impact different SDGs every year, but if they are impacting the same ones, they're doing it in a different way every year. So not only are they diversifying, but they're still remaining very consistent in their business strategies. So you can see that they are promoting gender equality by promoting employee diversity and inclusion programs that include women and people from more marginalized groups to work for their company, and ensuring that they are trained well and that they are have the ability to move up the corporate ladder. So this just continues even more. You can see with X13, the MNC has taken urgent action to combat climate change. They're doing offshore wind, they're engaging in other environmentally friendly things, and they're making sure that they don't have a carbon footprint or that they're carbon neutral. So in conclusion, based on the positive impact of 11 of the 17 SDGs and 8 positive answers to the protocol questions, it is possible for energy MNCs to embrace environmental sustainability and maintain financial success by incorporating CSR and the SDGs into corporate business strategies. So yay, but the further limitations and further research, my one limitation was that I used only Orsted's press releases and reports. I wasn't able to interview Orsted employees to kind of cross-reference and check, but I didn't find any negative anything about Orsted. So everyone seems to collectively agree that they're doing right. And then just further research, I want to see the trajectory that Orsted goes. I want to see just how green they actually are. I want to see just the green energy transition under Biden, and also just the argument as well that green energy transitions are not as green as we think. And a lot of MNCs are engaging in this just because it's a good financial strategy and not because they actually care about the environment. But yeah, there's a lot of research that I would really like to do, but for now, that is the end. Thank you guys for listening, and I yield the rest of my time to the floor if I have any more time.
Thank you very much for that. Everyone is allowed to applause or put emojis or whatever they want to do into the chat box. And you can pull down your PowerPoint. That way we can all, people can put on the gallery or we can see one another in there. So congratulations. You're 90% of the way there now. There's only the last 10%. So close. So because I'm the president and I know you showed President Trump there, I took my inspiration and I'm going to offer Ambassador Einig the first post. Ambassador Einig, would you like to begin, please?
Yes, thank you. Renee, let me congratulate you on an excellent presentation, complete with PowerPoint, which was a bit of a surprise. But it was very good. I quite enjoyed the reading of it. I've got a couple of, well, first a small comment. You seem in some parts to conflict shareholder and stakeholder. In fact, you did it in the presentation itself. You conflicted it. And for example, on page 29, you say the bottom line of business is to make profits for itself and for its stakeholders, where I think that should be shareholders.
Yes, yes, probably.
Yeah, but anyway, just if you would mind, when you go through it and sort of compare and sort of make sure that you've got it right in terms of which it is. Then as a reader, what came out of this for me is that you seem to be taking a lot of pleasure in beating up on corporations, particularly in the theoretical portion about how they've got to sort of own up to all the terrible things they've done, that I don't think you've taken yes for an answer yet. I mean, this is important research and their implications are quite important, and I'm not sure you actually get to them in some points. Because, for example, what you're really saying here as a reader, what came to me is that this whole structure between Friedman and between the market and the environment is in fact what you're saying, in my mind, a false choice. Because you've given them an example where profit is being made by doing the right thing. And that's what you should be shouting in my mind. Because that's really what's important here, is that you're showing that all of this debate about why companies can't go green is really a false argument. And that's very important, and that should be stated very clearly, I think, as really what in my mind, what's the main outcome of this. Building on that, I would have liked to have then seen something about how relevant is this case study. Mm-hmm. I mean, is Orsted, is it scalable in a sense? I mean, if the whole industry did this, if all MSCs did this, would we still have enough fuel to everyone to be able to turn on their lights? I mean, so in my mind, it should be sharpened a bit, because this is very important and you explain it all very well, but I don't think you get to the ultimate conclusion of why is that important. And I think the importance here is that you've really clearly shown that it's a false choice that everyone's arguing that they can't in fact go green. because you can show that companies can go green and still make a profit. That, in my mind, is the punchline here. Okay, and I think other than that, well, on page 18, double check whether or not it's 2002 that which you
Yes.
wrote, or 2020.
As soon as I sent it to you guys, I saw that and I was like, are you
Okay.
kidding me?
And really, other than that, that's all I have. As I say, I think you've got it all there. It's very nicely written. It's very nicely laid out. But I think you really need to just sharpen what is the conclusion of what you're saying, or the implications. And that's it for me. Again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, so he was pretty tough on you. You got through that.
Well, once she did the PowerPoint, there was nothing negative I could say. I mean, for me, getting a PowerPoint from Renee is worth everything else.
Well, he missed the speech before. My whole family's here.
So I guess there was some history to his PowerPoint comment. So it was very PowerPoint, and your argument was clear, and it was an evidence-based argument, which is just what we want from our theses at AGS. So, you know, it was effectively, this was a very good thesis. So whatever I'm going to ask you or say is in trying to improve the final draft of it. But yeah, bravo, good job. Like, in the comments are coming. Awesome job, Renee. Jury members not allowed to say that. First, there's a few things to clean up, and I've marked it up in here. And so if you're still in Paris, you can come pick it up, and then you just turn the pages, and it's one sitting, and you can fix these things. So everything here is fixable. There was no problem with writing. You write really well. It's like the spelling is good, the grammar is always correct. You have paragraph unity, so you have all the qualities of good writing. And so these things are not about writing. These are mostly about Chicago Manual of Style on there. And so I can acting as a copy editor. So in the bibliography, so I've spent a long time, I mean, an hour, marking up your entire bibliography for you to make it easy for you to make these changes. And you'll be glad. Later on, you'll know, okay, that was done. And so the weird thing is when you use the author date citation system, not footnotes, but as you have the parentheses, you have to put the date right after the name. So pretty much every single source, you'll have to go in there and cut and paste a bit. So the dates need to be moved before, and then you need to italicize the titles of journals and books and things. So I went through and underlined everything. So all you have to do is turn the pages. It's simple copy editing. Generally, with the citation of sources, you almost never cite the page number, which on many cases you can get away with when you're speaking broadly about the thrust of the entire work. But there'll be times when you cite a particular fact or a piece of data or so on, where you need to find the page number, and that can sometimes create problems, and you'll have to approximate. Tables and figures have to be numbered using renumbered. You're all your tables and figures. So this will take some time, but as I did, I went through and made the marks. So if you just turn the pages, you won't miss anything. So I made sure both on the table of contents and in the thing to look and make the numbering for you. So you can just mechanically do it. But so the idea is the first table in chapter 3 is table 3.1, or the third figure on in chapter 1 would be figure 1.3. So figures and tables, sometimes they need to be renumbered, and using the double numeration system, I've done that. Block citations, those are those kind of where you give a big quote. They're single spaced, and you don't need quotation marks with them because it's a block citation. You remove those. And then when you get to like around page 30 or 32, you were citing book titles, both in italics and also putting them in quotes. And so I've underlined those or circled them for you to fix those. So now I'm going to, there'll be some things in there, and I think it's a single sitting for you particularly.
Okay.
Work very quickly.
I'll have to talk to Tiffany about Zotero, because my bibliography is literally copy pasted from that. So we'll talk, Tiffany.
Okay. Yeah, and that's it. And I spent the time, and so it's all marked up in here. So I won't use any more time for that. But we just want to make sure we get this copy to you. So I liked very much the use of the word greenwashing. And I probably would have been tempted to just talk about the greenwashing hypothesis as one of the no answers in there. And there happened to be in Le Monde today an article about greenwashing in finance, and they were studying the variations, but only about 20% of the finance companies that promote their environmental sensitivity in finance, not energy, are actually doing things that fall within category, 8 or 9. So there's a European effort to kind of rein them in. I liked the greenwashing, and I wanted to ask you, isn't greenwashing even more profitable?
Technically, yes, it is more profitable because not only does it look good to the consumers or to the general society, but it does pay off in the long run, but it still doesn't negate the negative impacts that the corporation might be doing, and maybe to cover up the negative things that they're doing with their greenwashing, or just overall in general.
So yeah, because of your thesis, I'm very much now aware of this word. It's in my radar screen. So that's one of the joys of reading master's thesis, is being ahead of the curve. Now, finally, and this is where I'll use my last few minutes. So Milton Friedman. Okay, Milton Friedman, 3 times, Milton Friedman. So you cited a 1970 article of his in the New York Times and attributed his doctrine to it. But as you know, there was a book he wrote called Capitalism and Freedom in 1962. This was like Chicago University of Chicago Press bestseller, one of like the influential books in the adult section of the economics bookstore. Did you have a chance to read any part of that, Capitalism and Freedom, 1962?
I didn't read it, but I saw it quoted a few times, and it seemed actually the opposite of what he kind of said, or compared to the New York Times article.
Well, he has a chapter on where he puts out the social responsibility doctrine. And I think it would be nice for you to insert that in from the book and also to attribute it. But even that, the 62 book was drawn from lectures he gave in 1956. Mm-hmm. So by the time he wrote that article in the New York Times, he had been teaching this for 25 years. And so if you're in that part in there, it would be good to have the roots go all the way down to the bottom, and you can actually extract from it just the section on what he called the social responsibility doctrine, which is the part of that book that's relevant to your thesis. So I'm going to now pass it on to Rushi.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Einig and Professor Yates, for your comments, and very well done, Renee, on the presentation. I guess there's some, issues that I would like to, respond to. Ambassador Einig raised the issue of, sort of somewhere presenting financial success and sustainability as a false choice. And maybe I didn't understand the question, but I think that the entire thesis was about sort of bringing them together and showing that it was possible. So if you could just clarify what you would like to see, Ambassador Einig, because I didn't catch the probably the buzzword there, or the main.
If I could, I think the point is that it's there, but I think in the conclusion, that statement should be more sharply drawn.
Right. Okay.
Because as a reader, I had to look for that.
Right. Okay. I see.
So, and in my mind, it's the most important thing of the paper, the most important point of the paper. So it's just a matter of much more sharply highlighting that fact.
Okay, absolutely. But like all of these students, by the time they reach the conclusion, it's kind of like, okay, I want to get done. I'm rushing against a deadline. Right. So it's probably some of that. I appreciate that, and definitely that needs to go in, because that is really the crux of Renee's thesis. And as you suggested in your presentation, which you didn't, I think, in your conclusion, you could perhaps even put there, areas of future research. And you pointed out quite a few really important areas that you should mention there, and also put the specific questions that you could perhaps take over, to do a PhD down the road. I see in the comments that, you might just be the next professor in the web family. So for that, you're going to have to, solidify that conclusion, and then perhaps take some of those to the next step. I totally agree with, and I think that was pretty much it from Ambassador Einig, more or less. From Professor Yates, I thank you always for sort of doing the dirty job of doing all the little edits of the dots and, commas and all the formatting stuff. As I really appreciate that. So a hard copy of that would be very well appreciated. You raised the issue of, Renee should have perhaps picked up, the book and gone with Milton Friedman's social responsibility doctrine. He even got a Nobel Prize for it, I think, in economics, right? And I think part of the criticism, and that's why Renee, I kind of directed her to pick Freeman versus Friedman, because Friedman's Nobel Prize really came from a very economics oriented, it was sort of like a first introduction, I think, to the idea of social responsibility doctrine with economics. But I think what Freeman is saying is that, no, not quite. I mean, he's still stuck with sort of a more economic model, whereas Freeman really brings it to the stakeholder. And I think where Renee's thesis picks up is, the environment as a stakeholder. So definitely go back to that book and cite that, and perhaps have a table really laying out how they were, that contrasting, like his social responsibility doctrine versus Freeman. I think that would really clarify some of the issues that get raised about the difference between stakeholders and shareholders. And as I was writing to you in the chat, all shareholders are stakeholders, but not all stakeholders are shareholders. And I think therein lies the, what you're showcasing there. So yeah, I think that would be a great idea to put that in there somewhere. And then since you're having it so easy, Renee, I think I'm going to be the tough one, right? Because
no, please.
A couple of questions, and I think we've had a chat about this, but I think it kind of picks up from what Professor Yates said about greenwashing. And one of the points that you had on your, things for future research, in that I pointed to you that, the new wave environmentalism is really critiquing these greens, especially the clean energy giants like Tesla, for saying, oh, right, so we should be driving your electric cars, but what are you doing in Bolivia trying to get, lithium for the battery, and you're actually breaking more than you're fixing. So solar panels have had similar criticism about sort of what you call circular economy. In fact, where does this go? So it's like, not in my lifetime, but 20 years down the road, we're going to have to dispose of these panels. And I wanted you to respond a little bit to that criticism and where you see Orsted perhaps headed. So that would be the first thing. And in that same comment, I wanted to ask you if you ran into anything on the Orsted website or research about sort of like their post-COVID strategy, because I think all these companies are now showcasing some bit of, what they want to do post-COVID with that. So I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, so specifically in terms of the greens, the not so green side of becoming green, I think it's obviously something that's really difficult because, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. But in the long term, I think at least the technology specifically will increase and be able to be updated in the future for us to be able to take care of these issues. But again, it's kind of going back to that Kuznets curve, a lot of environmental degradation to reach the certain threshold before we're able to continue, or even leaving it for our future generations, which is not good. But that's and also another solution that we have as well. In terms of Orsted, they are working to research and figure out ways to recycle old windmills that aren't going to be able to work. But again, that's not until the future. But even just their post like COVID-19 strategy, they don't, it's kind of weird. Like they seem to have they're pushing for that positivity, but they also don't really seem to have like this is what we're going to do. It's a lot of in the future, sorry. Like they're remaining really vigilant about being honest that a pandemic is not going to get us out of the current climate issues, but they're also kind of pushing those ideas to, we'll figure it out later, not in my lifetime.
All right, in the interest of time, I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Renee. And you're muted, Douglas.
what we do now is we go to another room, so everyone who's here can remain here, and we'll actually now disappear and go somewhere. I don't know how to tell you this. That you have course passed. Yeah, we tried, rats, that Renee. We tried. I looked closely to find something, but I couldn't. So, you know, my little copy editing stuff, right?
Oh yeah, okay.
This boat. So it was, everyone agreed that it's great work, that you should go on and do PhD. I think it's the best case you could choose too, because energy companies are the most, you know, polluting for carbon. And so it's really, it's a very strong case. And so, you know, we think this was great work. So there's one thing though, you should add an acknowledgements page. And I'd like personally to take credit for your work.
Oh.
You can start with a paragraph or more about me and everything I've done to help you on that.
Push
no,
me, yes, of course.
In their little knowledge page, and maybe for your family or whatever. But you know, so look at Chicago Manual Style, where that goes. The acknowledgement page comes after the abstract, and you can insert that in afterwards. And so,
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'll shorten my acknowledgement page. It'll just say shout out to my haters.
Yes.
Yeah. What a day. I'm sweating, y'all.
Right.
It's the scar.
Yeah. The scar. Yay. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. And thank you for the last 2 years, even though it's been on Zoom, not in person. It's been great seeing or knowing you guys and having you in my corner. So I appreciate it.
It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure.
awesome. It's been a pleasure working with you, Renee. You're, you know, always smiley, cheerful, attacking people, picking up arguments and fights on screen, and then coming out of there like a queen. So no, you really rocked it. And you know, Renee is one person who'll drive herself sick stressing, but she meets the deadline and she does it the way she has to. So I really appreciated sort of her straightforward. She said I stressed her out a lot, but I didn't see it once. But I think I just have a knack of doing that.
The thing is, I can keep my camera off if I don't feel good.
She blames it on her hair, and then she
Tears, just staring at the screen. I'm kidding.
and thank you very much to Renee's family and friends who are here for supporting her. Bye, Ambassador Renee.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Congratulations
Really
again.
appreciate you all coming here.
Bye-bye.
So